too. The doors open. I don't know when you're gonna get. The doors open at 4:30.
Oh wow, it's early.
Because the ceremony's at 6:15.
Yeah. Okay. So
they're gonna do the ceremony before the warm up.
Yeah.
So the ceremony is gonna be 6:15, and let me see. I have the whole thing here, but here we go. Doors open at. I'll have some sound from that too. I don't know whether you want to talk about that next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just because he's one of the greats. I mean,
4:30. Yeah. You know what's weird to me, and I don't know what your take on it is. It doesn't seem like it's that big a deal nationally.
Yeah, I don't know if this is me just being too close to it as a fan. I've always felt that there's a little anti-Marty sentiment from some of the markets, either because he beat them. Or just the fact that why should the Devils have this? I don't know. I just feel like people they didn't hate him, but I feel like considering he really is, probably the best we're going to see. I don't know if people really like him all that much. I don't think he necessarily has, I don't think, outside of Montreal, I don't think people are Brodeur fans.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think there's something to do with... Although the whole stuff with his personal life doesn't get talked about much.
No, I bring that up more than other people do, to be honest.
Yeah, I hear it a lot from Ranger fans.
Yeah.
But I don't, it doesn't get brought up nationally a lot, Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, just because, it's such a... But I agree with you. There's something that's off.
Mm-hmm.
Across the nation about him for some reason. I don't know whether it's just because he got too big. I don't know what it is really, but maybe it was because he was the model of consistency, and then he fell off pretty precipitously.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think part of the problem is a lot of the NHL fan base that has grown in the past few years is kids. They picked up a lot of young kids, and I think people just don't. No, they don't even Jágr. I feel like there's probably some people who were like, "Who's Jágr?" They don't know what he did. They don't remember him all those years. I honestly feel like that's part of it too. Is that
it also might be because the Devils have this narrative of killing the game.
Yes,
because of the trap.
And Lou is a big part of it too, because Lou was so anti-marketing players. He literally would not allow anything to go up that was player-centric. And I think that hurt Brodeur. I really do.
It did, but I think it's more that the national narrative is that the Devils killed the sport, and it's obviously false because, Alexander Mogilny scored 43 goals the year they won their second cup?
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. No, because the year they went to the final, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
They led the league in goals, but for whatever reason, they just the 95 narrative just sticks because the rest of the league copied it, or the rest of the East at least copied it the 4 subsequent years. Mm-hmm. But obviously we could go into a debate about this too, but it's interesting that for whatever reason, he's not that big a deal to people.
No.
Even though he has more wins than everybody else. It might also be the market.
I think there's that too, that, when something happens in New York, it leaks everywhere because it's New York. Yeah. But I don't think, especially because Jersey, you literally think about it. If you have people in New Jersey talking about Brodeur, it literally ends in New York City, in upstate New York, and then once you cross into that South Jersey area.
I was going to say the border, yeah.
Yeah, there's no, there's no leak of think about if the Colorado Avalanche, there's not teams around there. You'll have people who are fans in Idaho and where, different because there's no one else out there. And Phoenix had just got there at the time, in 96. And that's the thing, is that their market is such a small geographic area that you don't have this leak of, a
lot of people though.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, a lot of people, but you go to New York and try to talk about Brodeur and everyone's like, screw you, Henrik is better,
Yeah. So okay, all right. So we can get into that next week too, though.
Yeah, that's perfect for next week. All right, so
okay.
I'm gonna take it away.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens. Pat, I know both of us didn't get a chance to get down there, but for anyone who is finally taking off their cowboy boots and putting their cowboy hat down from a really good weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, Pat, it seems like for as much as the NHL has struck out in the past on some of these things, Nashville seemed like the perfect place to be, huh?
It seemed awesome based on what I mean. I watched the whole thing, watched the whole skills. The skills were great. You get Dylan Larkin breaking the speed record. You get John Scott hitting 90, almost 96 miles an hour with a shot. We'll get to more. I mean, I know you're sick of talking about him, but Shea Weber in his home market, blasting the slap shots. It seemed like a great weekend based on all reports, and then the games were fantastic. I mean, a 1-0 game in the final, and the Pacific Division wins, and Scott's named the MVP. I loved it. It seemed like the players loved it. It seemed like the fans, for what it's worth, were into it a little bit. And Dave, compared to last year, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's funny. I know it'll never happen because obviously, they are going to be in LA next year. I almost think that screw it, put the All-Star game in Nashville every year. I know that'll never happen, but I mean, why fix it if it isn't broken? But just in terms of the city, I actually heard a good one through someone that there was I guess a casual fan at Tootsie's, the big bar that's down there in Nashville.
Yep.
And they go up to Steven Stamkos, not realizing who it is, and say, "Hey, I hear there's a bunch of hockey players in this bar tonight." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I heard that too." And I think for the players, they might have enjoyed it because it's a little bit of anonymity there. You go to LA, it's going to be crazy.
Well, even there, though, there'll be some anonymity, you think?
Yeah. But, I mean, to me, it just seems like they hit it out of the park. All the musical stuff was really cool, that they kind of really took the essence of the city and made it theirs. The fact that the convention center is right there and all the hotels and all the bars are right there, it seems like it's tailor-made for this. The NFL probably couldn't do something here because it's too big. But for the NHL and who they bring into it, it was perfect from what I know, just from reading different accounts from players, media, even fans. So I think they really hit the ball out of the park.
Yeah, especially the way it panned out with the John Scott stuff, and they got him in there, and Jeremy Roenick says he fits in and he scores a couple goals, and I heard Elliot Friedman talk about it on radio on the other day, and it's true. The first goal was spoon-fed for him, but the second goal he earned, and it felt like he may not have belonged there necessarily, but he didn't make himself look dumb, and I'm happy for him and his family, and just hope to see him back in the NHL sometime soon because it's unfortunate what happened to him. And I don't know whether – I mean, it seems like hasn't played a lot, but it seems like he's got to fit on an NHL roster, especially when you consider that his rights are owned by the Montreal Canadiens right now.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the Canadiens in a little bit here. Excuse me. But, yeah, it honestly – watching him instead of just talking about it kind of reinvigorated me on the topic, and I enjoyed it. Instead of just talking about why he didn't belong there, watching him belong there was really nice. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it should happen every year, but I wouldn't be against the idea of someone getting like a vote every year. Maybe not as a joke or kind of how this originally started, but honoring someone who's like a good soldier of the game. I think maybe they were onto something there, even if it happens in a couple of years down the road or whatever. But I loved it. It was great. It was great to see him with his family. I know he has two more daughters, I believe. His wife is pregnant with twins.
Yeah.
So just really good to see him enjoy it. I know there's been a couple comments by a couple of broadcasters, not going to name names here, but I think it's ridiculous. Why be against it? It has people talking about your sport that might not be talking about your sport.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, when all is said and done, especially now that we're past it, it was great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the interesting thing is that, like you said, it almost took some of the heat off of and some of the spotlight off of a guy like Jágr because, Jágr was I mean, you could almost make the case that Yager was voted the captain for a similar reason as John Scott. Obviously, the skill level is different, but they wanted to see him in that format in that game, and he's such an endearing personality to the rest of the league. Which, I mean, we could get into it a whole podcast about Yager's influence on the game and his evolution, because you look at him, he was the spoiled, petulant child player, and now he's grown into this model citizen who is awesome with the media when he does availability. He's great with in the room, but a lot of that came from. I mean, you almost expected Yager to be the focal point, and the Scott stuff took some of the heat off of that. But Yags, he's great, and there's just no shortage of personalities there. And it seemed like the guys embraced it for some reason, whether it was the $1 million, whether it was the couple games or whatever the reason was. But it seemed like it was the level of play was raised a little bit. Maybe the 3-on-3 had something to do with it, and the whole weekend seemed like a success. Like you said, you almost have to wonder if they're going to move it. I mean, LA to me seems like a great spot to have it, because the same point as Nashville. LA is downtown in LA is pretty condensed. I mean, it's a sprawling city as far as where people are, where people live, where things can be held. But there's a small, surface area of space where things can happen around Staples Center. And you just get the vibe that, they need that kind of arena. I mean, I guess they had it in Columbus too, and it just was the weekend was a problem.
Yeah,
Columbus the format was a problem.
Not a great town though by any means. I mean, nothing against Columbus, but yeah. Columbus does not have.
I mean, it's not Nashville, it's not LA.
No,
it's not But I mean, at the same time, you're not. You have to do this in you have to spread the wealth around. I mean,
yeah.
it's. I mean, you look at. New York hasn't hosted a All-Star game in 20 years, almost more than 20 years.
Yeah, we can put people in the Barclays Center and they can not see half of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, so but you got to spread the wealth around as the point, and obviously a lot of that has to do with the fact that the All-Star game is a periodical event that happens basically 3 out of every 5 years for whatever reason. But I digress. It was a great weekend. The format's great. Like to keep it. Honestly, and you know what the best part to me, I think, Dave, is, and we talked about it last year more, is that they still have the bullet of moving it outside if things get stale, instead of just going to that. It seems obvious and it seems natural progression, but the thing is that, there's the opportunity still to put it outside to add that little wrinkle if they want to down the road.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think the Winter Classic has gotten stale, especially because they shouldn't have been able to really do it in Boston this year. They got lucky that the Patriots' schedule was as such. The problem with the Winter Classic is on January 1st, it's very tough because of NFL teams. If they're home, they can't do it.
Yep.
And of course, the Patriots also ended up having the other week off anyway. But to me, I think it makes more sense to find a really cool building and do an All-Star game outside than even the Winter Classic at this point, to be quite honest. Because to me, the Winter Classic, it's the same teams over and over again. I'm looking more forward to seeing Minnesota and Colorado play at home outdoors this year than I was the Winter Classic, to be quite honest. I think you're onto something with that. I think it'll happen maybe a couple years down the road.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. Now we'll go to teams. Some teams have played. Most teams have played one side of the break. A couple of teams have played more than once. And Dave, the break apparently hasn't really aided the Montreal Canadiens. We alluded to their struggles. Dave, they've gotten 11 points in their last 26 games. Obviously, Carey Price's injury is a problem, and he doesn't seem to be coming back anytime soon. We watched him skate in practice before the game Wednesday night against Buffalo, and it looked bad. Dave, the Canadiens are going to miss the playoffs, and it's coming to the fact that the people up there are starting to talk about Austin Matthews more than they're talking about a postseason run. And where did this all go wrong?
Where did it all go wrong? I think like we've certainly talked about before, this team has had warts, and Carey Price did cover a lot of them. But I think, though, even in the midst of how bad they've been, I don't think they're quite as bad as they've been right now, and I don't think they're nearly as good as they were in the beginning of the season. I think they're somewhere in the middle, which, maybe should have had them a little bit better off than they are right now, considering that they've done nothing to help themselves. And if they had won a couple of games here and there, they'd be right in the mix. Look, they're 6 points out, but yeah, if they could have won even if they win 2 of those games, they're 2 points out. Okay, they have every bit of a chance to figure it out. But the fact that they're 6 points out here and tied with Ottawa, and even in terms of the wild card, there's quite a few other teams that are hanging around. Carolina has more points than them right now. There's some major issues here. When you look at this team, sure, they have some guys that can score. PK Subban has not been great this year. I don't think they're great defensively either. I mean, you look at a team that can survive. I mean, I guess we could count them on. Probably Chicago could survive not having their goaltender for a while because they'll just possess the puck enough to do it. Even Pittsburgh, the way they're playing, I think they could now survive with him. Without Fleury. The Rangers certainly showed they could do it last year. I don't know about this year, but for me, Montreal, they show what they have when they're unable to do anything without the goaltender. And I know we talked about this off air, but teams change the way they play. When they're playing against Price, when they're playing against anyone else that they're going to throw in net, because when you have Carey Price there, it's going to take a great shot to beat him. You are not going to score a garbage goal. You are not going to, luck out to score against him. So you have to be much finer and precise with your scoring chances. Because of that, you might try to do too much, turn the puck over, goes the other way. That's how Montreal kind of feeds off of it. Now, without him, you're faced with the idea of having to basically be barraged by shots all night because teams are just going to shoot and shoot because you're not great defensively, you're not great in goal, and then all of a sudden now you have no counterattack game or as much of as that they would want, and it changes the way teams play against you, and they have not been able to deal with that. And Michel Therrien is not taking any of the blame, and he's just saying, "Oh, we're not executing." But at some point, something has to give, right?
I agree, Dave. The other thing too that's interesting to me is that Connor McKenna was on with us last year from the radio up in Montreal, and he said that Carey Price covered a lot of their warts, and it's true. But you look at how average this team, not average, it's just how bad it's been. Do you know, Dave, that they have that of those 5 wins I mentioned, 3 of them have come in regulation. 2 of them have come in shootouts. So that means that they've got 3 wins in regulation since, let's say 4 wins in regulation since the first day, since the calendar turned to December. And, Mike Condon's played the bulk of those games, and he hasn't been particularly good. When you look at, especially lately, his regular season save percentage is .905, which when you consider, Carey Price was in the .930 range last year. That's a substantial drop-off. And, if that's a goal per game, that's why you lose if you give up an extra goal per game. I mean, granted, they've gotten bombed in some spots there. And what's interesting to me is, though, that we looked at Toronto a couple of years ago, and they were in this almost that same scenario where they were just, rolling right through the regular season. And then they completely fell off a cliff off of the Winter Classic. And the Winter Classic, Montreal looked like they were completely turning the corner after that horrible December. And then, they won another game against the Devils shortly thereafter. And since they've beaten the Devils on January 6th, they've won once. They've gotten 3 points in the last month. So, I mean, that's absurd. They made the trade for Scrivens. That didn't pan out. It's almost like, Mark Bergevin just like completely like grabbing at straws here to try and get something to go. The fans are tuning them out. You mentioned.
Did you see all those empty seats the other day?
It's absurd. I mean, what's interesting to me though is that it's almost like you said, to the point they're almost checked out of this team now. And it's not even Valentine. We just hit the All-Star break. This team was 9-0, Dave.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, if you look at the splits since they kind of cooled off, I believe, I can't remember exactly what it was, but through 26 games or whatever, they had some absurd number, where they were still pretty high, with the amount of wins. It's funny that they haven't even been bad. They've been really bad.
19 wins through December 1st. They're a 500 team now.
That's right. They were 19-4-3, I believe, through 26 games. So they're just getting up to they're at 52 games now. So they start out 19-4-3, and
they're 500.
It's been atrocious.
So I mean, and granted, Carey Price was the MVP of the league last year, and deservedly so. And you see why.
But Pato, is that an indictment? I actually heard someone else bring this up. I don't know if I agree with it, but just want to throw this out there to you. When a goaltender is the MVP, isn't that kind of a scathing indictment of the team he plays on? By basically saying that, he's in the MVP because, same thing as I make the idea for Corey Schneider this year, which I think is very much similar. To me, it seems like that's exactly the case with Price.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Dave? We mentioned Condon and his struggles. I mean, maybe that's just what it is. I mean, think about a couple years ago when they had to throw Dustin Tokarski in there in the Eastern Conference Final, and it all went south. But Dave, whether it's the goaltending, and they're fourth worst in PDO with 90 and 5-on-5 PDO is 98.7. So, it might be some luck there in terms. I mean, obviously it's luck because Price's injuries basically submarine them. But there's a lot of guys. It's not just Carey Price's injury. It's not so simple to say that it's Carey. I mean, you hear Mike Therrien say after their loss to Buffalo that they were bad in their defensive zone. But this has been a trend for the last few years here, with Markov is getting up there in age, and Yemelin is getting up there in age. And, they made the move for Jeff Petrie last year, and he hasn't done much offensively. And, he's not necessarily – I mean, it was a great move, I thought, last year. And Beaulieu is not really producing offensively at all, and they're all kind of a liability defensively. So you want them to shore up their defensive. I mean, this team is dead in the water at this point. And like I said, it feels like they're kind of grabbing at thing. I mean, they're calling up kids from the American League, and everybody thought that Brendan Gallagher coming back was going to be a big impact, but if you look at what the Max Pacioretty's scoring has fallen off a cliff here, Dave. Since the captain is always going to bear the responsibility, especially in Montreal, especially when he's American, and you just wonder, when the Wolves start calling out for him. Considering, we talked about that kind of line of demarcation being December 1st. He had 12 goals on 13 goals after that win in Columbus on December 1st. And he has 6 sits. So, I mean, it's almost an embodiment of the team's poor play at all. And I like Max. I think he's a great player. I think he's an underrated player. I think, he's great as the captain of that team. But he's struggling here, and so is the team.
Yeah, it's very true. I think the pressure is definitely on him. I mean, look, you're named captain of, this one of the most storied franchises in all of sports. You're the guy who the media is going to try to talk to the most. You might not have the answers, but you're trying to play through those answers. You're trying to be the difference maker on the ice. And I'm sure the pressure on him is insane.
Plus, he's not a rah-rah guy. He's one of those guys that's really quiet, really high example type. And what's interesting, I mean, you almost need a rah-rah guy at this point, when you're going through such a horrible stretch. Somebody who's going to, punch or, beat up water bottles or buckets or break sticks on the bench. And he's not the guy. So, I mean, it's as simple to say as Carey Price's injury. And it's an oversimplification in my estimation. I like your point, though, about how players feel they can be a little less perfect against Montreal, because you look at some of those chances that teams give. I mean, they win games with Carey Price before they even step onto the ice, because players are thinking, oh, well, I have to find a way to do it all myself, or, set up for the tap in or the extra pass. But there's more than just Carey Price at play there.
It's true. We could go on about this team for forever, just because they're so polarizing every single year.
Yeah.
To me, I think I think it's almost just inevitable now. They are going to miss the playoffs. I just can't see them coming out of this and passing this many teams.
My interest, the thing is too, Dave, and I don't. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the people are talking about Austin Matthews. They're also talking about blowing the thing up, but not in the way you think. I heard TSN 690 in Montreal talk about maybe trading PK Subban.
You know what? If depending upon what you could get for that, which I think would be a king's ransom,
it'd have to be.
You might, to me, I know my philosophy is I'm never going to say no to anything. If not that I'm a GM or anything, but just trying to look at it through that kind of thing. Sure. If they're offering me a first and a decent prospect, I'm saying no. I want a roster player, probably a first, a second, and maybe a prospect or two, and then I'll throw something back in on my side to go the other way. It'll be a huge amount for him just because, his personality, he's so marketable. Because he's just such an awesome guy. All the stuff he does with the charity work and all that, he's someone who you can market around because of his personality. Wearing the Yager get up. And he's good. Certainly he's struggled a little bit this year, but I think that his value would be astronomical. You think of what people are trying to get Dustin Byfuglien, who's certainly a lot older than PK. PK, I think, is better anyway. It would take a lot to get him. I'm not sure many teams would want to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's interesting to see that because my thought and my idea, my comment on it is that why not fire the coach first? Like, why are you going to trade PK Subban when you have a coach before the coach here? Mike Therrien got fired in Pittsburgh. They won the cup the same season under Dan Bylsma. Like, why are you so obsessed with keeping Michel Therrien in the play? But, you're going to start talking about trading PK Subban? Are you crazy?
It is nuts. And you know what the fact is it come down to, and I know we talk about this, is that the coaching pool is smaller up there because they want someone who speaks French. And I'm sorry, but if you're in the business of winning games, which is what it all comes down to, that's the antithesis of this. When we try to get cute and talk about other things, it's all about winning hockey games. If they feel that they need a French-speaking coach over what should help them win games, then they are never going to win another Stanley Cup anytime soon. Because I'm sorry, but if you're going to take away or more than half of your coaching pool because you want someone who speaks French, you're wrong. I'm sorry. I don't care. I get it that they want, the people who speak French. I'm not trying to be racially insensitive at all.
He's got to do the interviews in 2 languages is the thing. But and we talked about a little bit off air that the whole Randy Cunneyworth experiment didn't pan out.
Yeah.
And he he was a great soldier, or one of the sons of Montreal. But and so there's a little gun shy there. But they have Sylvain Lefebvre in the American Hockey League. He's been there for a few years now. He's a francophone player. He's a former Canadian. He's just sitting there in St. John. I'm not saying, AHL. There's not necessarily a lot of teaching that necessarily has to go on in the Canadians because they're such a veteran roster. You almost think of Therrien as being the one guy, but it's, if you have these delusions of grandeur where you want to win the Stanley Cup and you have the talent to win the Stanley Cup and it hasn't happened for whatever reason, we saw it in Pittsburgh. They didn't want to waste Sidney Crosby's prime forever here. How much longer can you waste PK Subban, Max Pacioretty, Carey Price's primes here with a coach who may or may not be, even doing the right things with the roster you have?
That's a very, very good point. I think, and I said this with St. Louis because, excuse me, I still don't think St. Louis is going to be a real threat this year. I thought that they needed to make a coaching change. I think that when you are faced with a possible roster transition, before you do that, because basically you're saying that we failed, we're going to start again. I think it's worth it to change the coach once, to try to see if maybe restarting it works. I mean, look, Pittsburgh did it.
Yeah.
I mean, look where Pittsburgh was. I was really down on that team. I'm thinking, I was never down on Crosby. I just figured, he'll be fine. But I mean, they were struggling really badly, and the questions about that roster were starting to come up. Trade Malkin, we heard a couple times.
Yeah.
They changed the coach, and everything's okay. And they look like they could be a team that could. Hell, I would not be surprised if Pittsburgh gets out of the East this year. To be quite honest,
Nope.
I'm not saying that they're going to, but I would not be surprised at all. I think that you need to do something when you have a roster that's falling off like this. You try one last thing, and that's changing the coach. And if that doesn't work, then you blow it up.
Sure.
Why not do it this year? Especially if they know where they're going already with the next coach, do it.
Yeah, this is year 4, and I know they've had some great moments. They were the number 1 spot in the year of the lockout. And they got to the conference finals 2 years ago, to the 6th game, and there's some struggle there. And last year was such a great year, but you get the sense that this is, that if this is the case, and that they're losing 2 inferior teams, and defense is the problem, there's an effort thing there, and when there's an effort thing there, it's usually going to be the coach. It's usually going to fall on the coach, is what I mean.
Yeah, it is, and look, we go on this for a while, but I think we've certainly said what needs to be said about it. It'll get interesting before we're all said and done here. I think there's going to be more twists and turns to this. I just hope it doesn't turn into a soap opera, which it could, because I know, but I'm just hoping it doesn't get to that point. I mean, we'll see. I'm sure we're not done talking about Montreal, but to switch to something that's been very good, at least for the first game he came back. I think we'd be remiss here if we do not talk about Connor McDavid, because he comes back. He missed quite a few games, upwards of 40 games. He comes back, and he does, which I'm sure a lot of you have already seen. If you haven't, go watch the clip. Watch Connor McDavid's goal, please. Unbelievable. I mean, absolutely unbelievable what he did to skate through guys and then to make the goaltender look absolutely foolish. He is doing things at 18 years old that most guys will never do in their career. I mean, at 18 years old, I was just happy to be in college and, maybe talk to a girl or something like that. But Connor McDavid is making grown men look bad at their jobs. I think he's going to reinsert himself into the race for the Calder. I really do. Just because I think he's so polarizing in himself that if he goes out there and starts putting points up, people are going to jump on the bandwagon.
Dave, I love the goal. There's nothing not to love about the goal. But if you look at the primary assist he got on the 3rd point of the game he got, it's almost, you almost see his, to use a phrase that you hear from coaches and whatnot, his compete level and his motor, because, he's stuffing the puck behind the net and he's trying to stuff it. I mean, it's a 4-1 game in the 3rd period, if I'm not mistaken. And, he gets robbed first off, and then he stuffs the puck, tries, and then he behind the net finds Jordan Eberle for the tap in, and it's almost like that jubilation, that exuberance you see, and I heard Todd McClellan, and I made sure to listen to him, that there's a lot of frustration built up because. I mean, you look at the Pacific Division could have been had this year in some case. Maybe not the championship, but if McDavid's not out 37 games, he's probably in the Calder Trophy. And you said you thought he was going to wheel them to the playoffs. And if he had missed maybe 25 games, that 12-game stretch in there, maybe that would have been the case.
I think he would have. I really do.
Yeah, but Dave, what's most impressive to me is you look at some of the superstars of the game right now. You look at guys like, Tyler Seguin and, guys like Kuznetsov, who's having a fantastic year, and Nicholas Backstrom, who's having a fantastic, and Erik Karlsson, who's an elite offensive player in this league. And some of the, you mentioned Crosby and Ovechkin and Tarasenko. And do you know that Connor McDavid is 4th in the league in points per game this season? Yeah. He's averaging 1.07 through 14 games. That's slightly behind Tyler Seguin. It's better than Kuznetsov, better than Carlson, better than Backstrom, better than Pavelski, better than guys like Malkin, guys like Ovechkin and Tarasenko, and those types of players. So I mean, you talk about obviously the injury might cost him the Calder Trophy, but 3 points in his first game back. And, he's a point-per-game player. Like you said, now he's 19 in his 18-19 season. Like, how good is this kid going to be in 3 years?
I think he's going to be all-world. And I think also just in terms of his own team, the Edmonton Oilers are getting the new building soon. I think also the fact that everyone slots in the right spot now. I mean, Taylor Hall's had a really good season. Leon Draisaitl's been really good at times. I just think that in terms of what he does for them, because they have other talent around him. I know, trade this guy, trade that guy, yada yada, and they need to get better defensively. The goaltending has actually been okay for them at times this year. At times,
Cam Talbot is not very good.
He's had a couple decent games though for them. I mean, sure, there's been a lot of bad ones in between, but they need to upgrade themselves defensively, no doubt. But offensively, when you slot him in there and where it puts everyone else, this is the makings of a really, really good offensive team.
And it just seems like everybody he plays around gets better. You talk about Yakupov, they played together earlier in the year, and he goes out, or McDavid goes out, and Yakupov's play falls off a cliff. You look at it, play him with Eberle the other night, and it's really you saw he scores the goal, they score a power play goal, they look like a confident team. I mean, granted, Columbus isn't very good defensively. They're playing with I guess like a third string goalie at this point with Bobrovsky's, injuries and whatnot. But, it just, you see the flashes of greatness that this is why he was the number one pick. This is why he was the generation. This is why we heard about him as a 15-year-old, we talked about it when he got hurt, and it was frustrating. It was upsetting to a lot of people because, we waited so long to see what he could do at the NHL level. And he had 12 points in his first, 13 games in the league. So he was showing flashes, he was showing brilliance, he was showing signs of greatness, and then you miss that. And it's been tough up in Edmonton. It's a cold winter up in Edmonton anyway. And you look at, without Connor McDavid, and then now you're going to start seeing what this kid is made of, is what you expect. Like I said, Columbus not very good defensively, but, you look at his two-way game too. Picks Seth Jones's pocket and gets a breakaway out of it. Creating, he draws a penalty on his first shift in 3 months, and he draws a penalty, and then, off the penalty they get some chances, and they were out shooting Columbus 13-1 in the first, 8, 10, 12 minutes of that game. And Columbus scored on its second shot on goal. So, I mean, there's a confidence there that came from having him in the lineup. And now, granted, I'd like to see him against a more maybe conservative defensive team. And we're going to kind of see that but it's great to just see him back on the ice and playing, and exciting and excitable and wow, because this is what we all wanted to see from him.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he's going to be every bit as good as advertised. I mean, we look at where Crosby was right away. Yeah. Stamkos actually struggled as a rookie. I mean, he had 46 points, but people expected more out of him, I guess, because he came shortly after Crosby. But I think he, maybe I was wrong about this year because of the injury, but if he stays healthy, he is going to will this team into the playoffs sooner than later just because he is that good. And I've got a really good one for you here. Yeah, I know we always talk about the Barclays, just to move on a little bit from here. Barclays Center CEO has said basically that, I'm going to paraphrase here, that if you're in a seat with an obstructed view, we have a lot of good seats anyway. So if you can't really see, just watch it on your smartphone. That's bad.
There's going to be a problem there. I mean, I know some people who work at Barclays Center, and that's basically been the That's been their stance. It's like, well, what can we do? Throw up your hands like, well, this is our building. What can we do? Sorry.
Yeah.
It's awful, especially when you factor that the Islanders are going to be probably, I would say probably a playoff team, at least this year, and it appears they're going to be perennially a playoff team, and that building just is going to be they're going to be either 29th. I mean, potentially maybe if Carolina moves, or if Carolina, if the fans down there start getting going here with the team that they have, which is a better team than advertised before the season, they're going to be dead last in attendance. Now the revenues are going to be higher there. There's no question, because the seat prices are more, and there's more suites. But it's going to be an embarrassment, because you're going to get a playoff game. They're going to get a playoff series potentially against the Rangers in the first round. And even if it's not the Rangers, if it's the Capitals, if it's the Penguins, if it's, long shot, maybe the Devils, these are rivalry series. And they had that rivalry with the Caps that started last year, really. And that dates back to the old Patrick division. And if they're going to be empty seats, like thousands of empty seats for these games, the NHL is going to want to intervene there.
Yeah, and this is Barclays Center CEO Brett Yormark, and he says, quote, "Our seating capacity is over 15,700. Within that capacity, there are a lot of great seats. Do we have some obstructed seats? Yes, we do. Are fans aware of those obstructed seats before they purchase them? Yes, they are. There's really nothing we're going to do from a capital improvement standpoint. You can watch the game on your mobile device. The game is on the scoreboard. There are many ways to view the game if you're in one of those obstructed seats.
You know what? And
we aren't going to be able to change the seats in the building.
Just sit at home and watch the game.
Yeah, why would you go? I mean, especially when you're talking about people from the island coming all the way to Brooklyn. And look, there's plenty of people who are Islander season ticket holders that are from Suffolk County, which if you're not from this area, to try to get from way, way, way eastern Suffolk County all the way even to Nassau, to western Nassau, where the Coliseum was a hike. Trying to get to Brooklyn, forget about it. I mean, it's taking you 3 hours to get there. So already they've alienated some of their fan base, and they expect Brooklyn, which is certainly, has a lot of people, but I don't know if they're really going to get behind it necessarily, to go into a building that, as you always say, is cold, maybe a little bit, cold on the heart too. Yeah. And the fact is,
the food is crazy overpriced for food.
Yeah.
The amenities there are not. I mean, the fan amenities are not great there. It's a bad. It just seems like just such a strange, and I feel like short-lived endeavor here. But I mean, I don't have any proof. I don't have any reason to believe that. But you just get the vibe that this is bad all around, and that Brett Yormark throwing up his, well, what can we do? This is our building.
Sorry, guys, just do what you want. Yeah, but I'm sure you're happy to take the money of all the fans.
They've been killing Yormark the whole time here, though, the fans, and for whatever it's worth, there's a lot of complaining that gets done from the Islander fan, and some of it is preposterous. But when you have a building that has thousands of obstructed seats, that is going to alienate your fans who are paying their money. They're paying sometimes. I mean, if you sit in those obstructed view seats, you're paying more for food than you are for your ticket in some cases, and you're just going to say, well, sorry, it makes everything else look worse.
Of course.
If you could say, oh, at least we have this new building here, right? They would say that. I mean, the move from the Coliseum alienated the fan, but at least we have this brand new building. Oh, except for the fact that we have all these obstructed seats. I mean, it basically just says we need the revenue streams in the terms of the suites and the lower level ticket sales, and screw you guys. So, I mean, that's what it says. And I like the Islanders in terms of their team, in terms of their organization. The people I've interacted with them, they've been great to me.
Oh, no doubt.
And they're first class, and they do everything the right way in a lot of ways. But man, these Yormarks, they just love to anger people.
Yeah, I just hate seeing a team like that
Florida
struggle. Yeah. And then, of course, real quickly here, just before we get on to our final topic of the day, the Carolina Hurricanes are very, very quietly, and I mean probably people don't even realize where they are in the standings right now.
Silently, almost.
Yeah, well, I mean, Carolina Hurricanes have been very good lately. They're very much a plus possession team. The Corsi numbers and stuff will say that.
PDO is their goaltending's really been what kills them.
Yeah, but I mean, just this team is still struggling mightily. I'm not going to get into the whole moving thing with them, but they are struggling in terms of attendance, dealing with stuff kind of maybe similar at least to what the Islanders are dealing with attendance-wise. But Carolina is going to have a tough decision here. And, Pat, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. If you're Carolina and you know that you're struggling to get people into your building, and you do have a chance at the playoffs right now. I mean, as of right now, they're 4 points away from being right in the mix. Do you hold on to everyone in the hope that maybe you get a couple home games in the playoffs this year, which is probably not very likely, but could? Or do you trade away someone like a Stahl or even someone else and get better for the future, but alienate what's left of your fan base in the process? What do you do?
I think that's a very difficult call. And Ron Francis is one of those guys in their organization who is like, he's a god in that organization, and he's running the organization down there. And it's a difficult spot he's been placed in because we've heard so many talks about Eric Stahl. Is he, should he get traded? Is he going to get traded? We forget, Eric Stahl, I've been watching him for 10 years now, basically in the NHL, and he's only 31 years old. So it's not like he's this old player who's over the hill, who's, one last run at the cup here. He's still pretty young, and he's having a pretty good year here. Now, they have a lot of upcoming unrestricted. Chris Prestige is unrestricted. Nathan Gerbe, who's been a big guy in that organization. Riley Nash, who's kind of an up-and-coming player. These guys are all unrestricted here. I think, they have Ryan Murphy, who is the last year of his entry-level deal. I think I would probably try to deal Stahl. Just despite whatever message it sends, I don't like the message it sends because, like you said, they're right in it. But I think we're going to learn a lot about the Hurricanes. They lost in Calgary on Wednesday night. They're a hard team to play against for sure. And from the get-go they've been. They're I believe one of their first home games of the season. They outshot Detroit like 46-14 and lost because I think it was Jimmy Howard stood on his head and they gave up a couple goals. Now, the problem with that scenario is that, you're going to find out a lot about the team because they're going through Calgary, Winnipeg, and Montreal. If they lose these games, it'll make it a lot easier because they'll have fallen out of the race here. But, they've got a lot of divisional games coming up here between now and the end of the break. They get Pittsburgh, they get the Islanders, they get the Flyers, all at home between now and the trade deadline, which is February 29th. So, you tread water, you stay in the hunt, then you go for it. Maybe you try to add, but it just feels like the goaltending has been so bad for them with Cam Ward and Eddie Lack that they're going to fall out of it here probably in the next week or two, and that'll make it a lot easier to sell.
Absolutely. I think that would be, unfortunately, never want to wish, bad on any team, but I think that would make it easier for them.
But
just
also,
because,
Dave, my point, if they're in this position on February 29th, I think they're still probably going to look to sell.
I would, personally. I would.
Yeah, because you're in a tough spot. What did we say? 3 points out of a playoff spot. Pittsburgh's got all those games in hand for now, but this is Noah Hanifin. This is going to start building to be Noah Hanifin's team. Start building, with some of your young players, with maybe the Jordan Stahl because he's signed for a big deal. Jeff Skinner, who's still only 23 years old. Hard to believe that. But Elias Lindholm, you're going to start trying to build these younger players and those type of guys and kind of maybe look, I don't know what you do with Eric Stahl here because, he's been the face of that organization really since, even dating back to like that run to the conference finals in 2009. he was really the face of that franchise. But like, it's a younger league. I don't know. I mean, this Eric Jordan thing has been kind of strange just because, they've been line mates sort of, they've had him on different lines at times. And it's really, but like I agree too, to your point, Dave, though, that this is 7 years and counting on in terms of the missing the playoffs, and they're going to celebrate the cup, the 10th anniversary. Can you believe it? 10 years since they won the cup.
Yeah.
Next weekend. So, I mean, the people are starting to check out. And, I mean, like you said, 30th in the league in attendance. And they have this team that's better than anyone could have imagined. I mean, this was a team that was supposed to be in the Austin Matthews sweepstakes potentially. And now they're kind of in a playoff hunt at the moment. But, it just feels like, the right thing to do is sell. I'm not saying Ron Francis is going to do that. I'm not saying that the pressure isn't immense on him, but I think the right thing to do probably is to try and offload some guys, try to get some prospects, try to get some picks, and kind of look towards next year and the year after, really, because that's kind of going to be their window. I mean, Cam Ward's coming off the books finally at $6.3 million. I mean, it's not like they're a cap team, but that's a pretty substantial amount of cap space they're going to get, just from having that awful contract on the books.
Yeah, I mean, there will definitely be brighter times ahead for them, no doubt. But our last topic of today, teams kind of going in opposite directions, 3 of them actually, fighting for 2 or maybe 1 playoff spot. The Minnesota Wild, Colorado Avalanche, and Nashville Predators all kind of bunched up there. We all thought Nashville was kind of a shoo-in. We probably thought Minnesota was. Colorado was a team that, maybe they could make their way in there. But all of a sudden, Colorado looks to be the best of these teams. Nashville, they have been scoring a little bit more since Johansson got into the fold, but they're not playing good defense, and Minnesota has just been off as well. Pat, how many of these teams do you think makes it, and who would it be, and what's going on? Because all these teams, I think, have the ability to be making some noise in the playoffs, but lately, I'm not sure if you count on any of them.
We talked about with Montreal, and we talked about last year with Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota's goal scoring has been non-existent. They're just an anemic offensive team of late. And then they finally score 3 goals on Tuesday at your beloved Barclays Center, and give up 5. So go figure. I mean, it feels they've fallen off a cliff here offensively, basically since the new year hit. Really more since like after the first week in January. But this team has the capabilities of putting it together here. Dubnyk has to play well. They have to get some contributions from some guys that they are not really, like where's Tom Vanek been? Again, it feels like we say this once a year. What's the story with Thomas Vanek here? 29 points in 50 games. I mean, where's this offensive talent? Where's all this skill they have? The Pominvilles and Niederreiters and so I mean. Anyway, so Minnesota's offense has been a disaster. Yeah. They have look at it. They have the third fewest goals in the Western Conference, fewest in the Central Division. But they still have a +4 goal differential. So, they're obviously very good defensively. Nashville's been a problem with the goal scorer. I mean, you mentioned Johansson. That trade just doesn't look bright. I mean, I know they need to get – I mean, you mentioned Stamkos earlier in the year. And – it was a stretch with them, and it was always going to be a stretch with them. I mean, give Johansson credit, 10 points, 11 games, but you said it. All 3 of these teams look flawed in their own special way because Colorado somehow is just kind of rolling along here with their 3rd goaltender. Can't keep pucks out of their own net, though, is the problem, of course, with them. The Corsi stuff and whatnot, the sod suppression is not good, but they're tough to play against because they have all that skill. The goaltending's been phenomenal. If you watch that game against LA before the All-Star break, they were fantastic. with the skill and the speed and some of the playmaking. And they're having guys who are having, it's weird though, Dave, because Colorado was awful out of the gate, and they were just brutal, especially in their own end. And now all of a sudden they've kind of shored that up a little bit here, and they're getting. I mean, look at the year Matthew Shane's having 23 goals.
Yeah, he's
so. I mean, it basically took off right around the second week in November. So, I mean, and look at the kind of depth and points production they're getting, where McKinnon's having a good year. Landeskog, those guys are playing together for a while, and they're having a big year. So Landeskog went down. And, Tyson Barrie, our favorite player, or one of our favorite players here, I don't – it's hard for me to put a lot of stock in Colorado having the staying power, especially when you consider that, Nashville and – Minnesota were playoff teams last year. Minnesota's been a playoff team, how many years in a row here now? But Dave, if I were honestly going to guess right now, I would say Minnesota's going to be the odd team out.
I think this race is too close to call right now.
Of course.
I think Minnesota. The fact is that the goaltending hasn't been quite as good. And also they're not scoring as much. Last year they kind of got in because they did have some timely scoring, and the goaltending was off the charts.
I mean, let's not forget Devin Dubnyk was an MVP candidate for a while.
He was.
I mean, it was like I think he finished in the conversation for the MVP and the Vezina Trophy last year. So that's how good he was last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for them, they're very average now. When the goaltending has been good. I'm not saying Dubnyk's been bad, but he's been good, and the goal scoring is not there. Nashville, to me, Pekka Rinne's inability to kind of find what we expect is the groove that maybe it never comes back for him. I'm not sure, but I think that's been an issue, is that he has not been able to steal games for them. They've been better offensively. I think the Johansson deal, as much as I was against it, I actually think it helps him. He's been pretty good since he's been there.
Yeah.
And Colorado, I kind of like this team. I feel like we saw them 2 years ago be really, really good. We saw them last year be pretty bad. I think now we're seeing them finally even out to what they are.
Yeah.
Which is a team that certainly has its flaws. The goaltending injuries actually are amazing because, look, I mean, we talk about Montreal not being able to win with the goaltending.
Yeah.
Has Colorado missed a beat? They've been better since they've lost some of their goaltenders.
Picard, has been phenomenal for them.
Yeah. I mean, Captain Picard, it's actually pronounced. I know he goes by Pickard, but,
Yeah. I always do that.
I know. You got to go with Captain. Oh, yeah, I'm going to throw a Star Trek reference in there, and that's all I'm going to say. We're going to move on now. Yeah, I think Colorado, I like what I see from them. I really do think that they are going to be a playoff team. I'm not sure who's going to be the odd man out, but I've liked Colorado's game lately. I think that offensively they have a lot more talent. Tyson Barrie is getting, I know, Pat, you and I always talk about that. There's no clear-cut winner for the Norris right now. Tyson Barrie is a guy who in a year or two, when he really rounds out his defensive game a little more, is going to be right there. He is so good offensively, and he's better defensively than he's been. Look, they have some talent on this roster. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and they're going to get Varlamov back too. He had this whole thing with the civil suit, with the alleged domestic dispute, which obviously kind of was a thing. It has been a cloud hanging over their head for the last couple of years here. But, they're going to get him back, and he's their guy, and you can't, say what you want about Pickard. This would be like, Montreal throwing like the Mike Condon had in November while Carey Price was on the shelf, where if, you could trust him for, maybe 7 to 10 games, and you look at what Pickard's done, in that, I mean, Red O'Bara has been hurt too, which Red O'Bara was fantastic for them, kind of in this resurgent kind of way, the way they were, the way that they were doing things, in that stretch as they kind of came back here a little bit. But, Pickard, he's really been pretty good, 917 save percentage, 10 games. What more can you ask for, really, from a guy as the third goalie, So, I mean, Red O'Bara's numbers were in the high 940s early. He's kind of fallen back to earth. But, I mean, Varlamov's going to be the guy. He's had his woes. He's had his struggles at times. But, he's a 9.18 this year, and that's kind of what you're going to get. Is he a top 10 goalie in the league? No. He played like you said. That's why they were the Central Division champ that year. But you get the vibe that if Varlamov's going to come back here and play that 920 to 925, it's going to be enough because they're not going to have any trouble scoring goals with that skill.
Absolutely. And Pat, one more thing before we get out of here, and I agree with you on that, about the Colorado Avalanches, is that I think that the maturation process is part of this that maybe we're not talking about because they had so many young guys that they're really coming into their own now, where, Duchesne is really becoming a veteran, and even McKinnon's been around for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. And I think that we kind of almost forget about that when this team was first constructed with the current makeup and they made the playoffs, they were really young. I mean, they were, they had no idea what they were doing that year, probably.
McKinnon was playing, like you said, like he didn't even know he was. He was the number one pick. In 11 or 10 months prior. So it's almost like last year they grew up a lot too. And there were so many whispers about Patrick Waugh's job earlier in the year, and you just get the sense. You just get the sense that the guys like playing for him. For whatever it's worth.
I agree
that the statistical community doesn't grasp that they don't like it. They're still horrible, but that he's for whatever kind of player he was, he's even keeled. He's a player's coach. He knows what they went through, and that the guys really like and want to play for him, which is more than you could say for some of the guys in the league.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. I really do think that he has done a better job than people might give him credit for. Sure, it might be unorthodox, but I think it just works out there. Especially, look, they're in Colorado. It's a different kind of atmosphere out there. No, I'm not really.
What do you get at, though?
Not even alluding to that sort of thing, but it's just a little bit more, laid back, fun. They just seem like they're a team that I think the fans will really begin to, look, if they make the playoffs this year, I think they could maybe even surprise someone. But Pat,
don't sleep on Jarome Iginla's impact there too either.
No, absolutely. I think he's helped them grow up.
Sure.
Pat, right before we get out of here, what are you looking forward to in terms of maybe the weekend or the next few days ahead? In terms of the schedule, as every game becomes important now.
Well, I'm excited. The Devils and Rangers are always exciting. We saw that game earlier in the week in Newark. It was a lot of fun. They're going to play again Monday, but I'm going to keep my eye also on an interconference matchup between Anaheim and Pittsburgh. Actually, you could almost keep your eye on the full slate of games Monday because every one of them has playoff implications. Tampa's in Ottawa, Florida and Detroit. Florida could be, a 2-3 matchup, but Anaheim and Pittsburgh, two resurgent teams. Anaheim, all of a 22-11-5 over the last, let me do some math here, 38 games. And don't maybe a little Jack Adams because he was on the hot seat for the. It looks like they're kind of cemented in a playoff spot. And Mike Sullivan, who, basically for not being Mike Johnston, is could earn that Jack Adams consideration too. I would like to keep my eye on that for a lot of reasons. Crosby, the skill, Getzlaf, Perry, Bruce Boudreau in Pittsburgh. There's some history. So that's where I'll keep my eye on. Besides the Super Bowl Sunday, which we'll all be watching. What about you, Dave?
For me, it's going to be the next Wednesday, the 10th. Rangers at Pittsburgh. These teams have not played each other this year, if I'm correct. They play a lot of games against each other. And I think the winner of that series, even if it's by a point or two, is going to have home ice in that first-round series. No disrespect to the Islanders, but I think that especially if one of these teams can roll against the other team, and it's at Pittsburgh, it's at Console, the first one here, I think that's a really big game because I think home ice is at stake.
Don't sleep on how close that series was last year, too. It was a five-game series.
No doubt. I think in overtime points would be the difference.
5 one-goal games in that series last year, and the fifth one was decided in overtime. So, it was a lot closer than, the 5-game series that it looked like last. Every playoff series is a lot closer than, sweeps and 5-game series and overtime and stuff. But and those teams are close. both in the standings. Pittsburgh's got, I think, a couple games in hand on the Rangers. So yeah, that's a good one to look at.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, every single game is going to be big. 4-point games
And even the games that aren't big involve Connor McDavid for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a must-watch. And, of course, next week, the other thing is Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers go to visit the New Jersey Devils on Marty Brodeur retirement night. So we'll talk a little bit about the career of Martin Brodeur next week. I know you're going to have a bunch of quotes. You will be there for that one. So we'll get into that one next week. That should be a fun topic just in terms of, I know we were talking a little bit about just the perception of Brodeur. And maybe, as we get closer to it, maybe it'll kind of tell itself, but we'll have some interesting points on that. Pat, anything else you'd like to add, or are we done here today?
You got to.
I lost you there.
Do you have a Super Bowl pick for us, Dave?
I do have a Super Bowl pick. I am going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I'm a big Peyton Manning fan. I have been since I was a little kid. I just think that they are an unmovable object at this point. They're just going to roll through it. They look great. I mean, defensively, they're gonna pressure Manning. I can't see Manning being able to make throws down the field against that team. And Cam just has it happening too. So, Pat, are you sticking with the Panthers, or are you going Broncos?
I'm gonna go with Carolina. I like the under. If you're into that kind of thing, just because I think the defenses are. I mean, Carolina. Don't sleep on Denver's defense. Is really exciting and a difference maker, and could make things difficult for Carolina for sure. If they get some pressure, they could force some bad throws. And don't sleep on the hockey games that are before then too. You get Philly and Washington, and then you get Connor McDavid at Barclays Center at 2:30. Good lead up there, and the annual Montreal before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's going to be really fun trying to watch Connor McDavid from an obstructed view seat because he's so fast that you're going to see him and then you're not going to see him. And
watch him on your mobile device, people.
Exactly. All right. On that bombshell, we need to get out of here. So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. This has been Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. We'll be back next week. Tons to talk about. Can't wait to get at it again. Take care.